Hi, welcome back to the Sounds Like Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Henne. I'm here with my friend Mike Addison, who is a husband and a father and the founder of the Jesus First Designs. So Mike is a personal friend of mine. He and his wife have been friends of mine for several years. Our kids,
Mhm.
have done homeschooling together, and we go to church together as well. So welcome, Mike.
Well, welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you decided to start the Jesus First Designs. Can you tell me what your inspiration was behind it?
A need for a creative outlet, really, kind of the start of that. I love to be creative, and um, my previous jobs, I've always had a little bit of ability to be creative, but it ultimately became somewhat routine. I was in construction most of my life, and you work in different houses, and you might be doing different things, but at the end of the day, it's all the same, right? So I still needed a different way to express some creativity. I do some other things, paintings and whatever, but I've always loved design work, creating logos and t-shirt graphics and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, online sales is kind of hot right now, so let's see what we can do and get into the Etsy world. And so that's kind of how it happened. Just started creating some different t-shirt designs and throw them up on Etsy, see what happens. And that's just kind of where it landed. It's developed a little bit since then, but like we were saying a little bit off air, I don't know much how to advertise the store, so I don't get a ton of traffic, but I do on occasions. So it just it is what it is.
Well, I love the name, Jesus First. What was the inspiration behind the name and the vision of what you have
Yeah.
for your?
So that kind of developed as well. Obviously, we always want to keep Jesus first in our lives and in what we're doing. But it's a little bit of a play on words, so to speak. Obviously Jesus first. That's the first part of that. But when we look at creation, right? Like, what was the first thing Jesus did? Right? He designed the earth and everything in it. So it was Jesus first designed, and Jesus first designs was kind of the iteration of that. Um, playing on the design factor of t-shirt and merch designs, but really kind of playing into how Jesus started, what we all see today. And when we look at creation, I mean, it's gorgeous. I mean, there's no denying that something created that, right? Just as simple as looking at nature, the trees and birds, and just all the things we get to enjoy.
Right, absolutely. And everything in nature so complex. It's things that we just take for granted because we just live here on this planet. But when you actually really dig into it, it's just mind blowing. The complexity
You
and
know,
the balance. It's just, yeah, absolutely. Jesus First designer, creator, absolutely.
hmm
So the show sounds like freedom, making our thoughts sound like Jesus is so they sound like freedom. Can you share a time in your life where you had to like really lean in to find that breakthrough into freedom in your life?
there's so many opportunities to share. Kind of narrowing
Right.
it down. I'll pick two if I can. Um,
Okay.
One more kind of leans more directly to your question, and then the other's slightly different. But um, my wife and I, we've been married 20 years this year. I would say probably about 5 years into our relationship, things were rough financially for us. Um, I've always had a passion for numbers, and I love helping people, and so I decided to dabble in the financial services world. And unfortunately, that was in like 2008, 9 timeframe. Well, we all know what happened then. So it was a pretty poor time to dive into financial services. But I gave it everything I had for about a year and a half, and it just didn't pan out. Unfortunately, our expenses didn't change during that time, so our income dropped in half, and our expenses kind of stayed the same. Um, so we really had to just pray. And that was about the only thing that we could do to get through that time. Unfortunately, that time lasted about 5 years. Um, I ended up going into business for myself, back into construction, something I knew, and made more money I was making in financial services for sure, but still it was barely enough, to get by. We had a mortgage and like 2 car payments and 3 credit cards that were all maxed out, and it was rough. But again, we just prayed and we just trusted that God would provide. And never once did we go hungry. We got very close, like dangerously close to losing our house. We were probably 6, 7 months behind in payments. The mortgage company gave us the opportunity to apply for a mortgage modification, which, if you're familiar with that process at all, very few people qualify for a mortgage modification. So we applied because we didn't have anything else to do. It was either that or our house was going to get foreclosed on. And we just prayed and prayed and prayed that something would happen, something would come through. And we ended up getting approved for the mortgage modification. Unfortunately, what that means is that you end up paying more than what your typical mortgage payment would be for a period of time. And then after that period of time, I think it's 6 months, everything basically gets refinanced. And we had to go through that whole process. So we're like, okay, well, we need more money now than what we were putting out before. How are we going to do that? Well, towards the latter half of that 5 years, I had got competition at work and had some steady income, and we were able to make those payments and get through that 6 month period. And then, our house refinanced and we were able to save our home. But in addition to that, if that wasn't enough, in that 5 year period, we not only paid off all 3 credit cards, but we were able to pay off both car loans as well. So in a time where we made half the amount of money that we made previously, we were able to get debt free within that 5 year period.
Wow.
What that gave us the ability to do was to move. It freed us up financially, that we were able to get back on track, save the money that we needed to save, and give a little bit extra time for the housing market to turn back around, so that we were able to move into the house that we're in now, that we've been in years this year. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing story. And that was probably the most amazing time in our life, from a God perspective, but it was also the most difficult time in our life. And my wife and I will both attest that, if we could have gotten to where we got, different, we probably would have. But we learned so much through that 5 year period, just, in trusting the Lord. And, when we look back and when we deal with situations now that seem tough, we always remember what God had brought us through, during those 5 years. And just like, hey, if he can bring us to that, he can bring us to this. So that's, whatever we deal with from that point on seems like it's a piece of cake in comparison. The second thing I'd share with that question too is a little different. Early on in our marriage, I think it was probably had to have been close to the first or second year. Tony and I were married. I suffer with seasonal allergies, and people who suffer with seasonal allergies can sometimes develop what they call oral allergy syndrome, which in short, it's basically a case of mistaken identity, right? So when I would eat an apple or an orange or a grape or a banana, my brain would say, he just ate pollen. We can't have that in there. And it would react anaphylactically. So like my throat, my face would start to swell up and I'd cough. And thankfully those reactions were minor enough that I didn't need to carry like an EpiPen or anything, and they would subside fairly quickly, but it just meant that I couldn't fresh fruits and vegetables. I could eat them cooked or processed because the heating process kills that protein that Smith identified. But I couldn't eat an apple or banana. I dealt with that for 15 years. So all the way up until the end of 2019. Our church was having a burn. It was our worship team's time to play. And we did a prophetic act where we basically wrote down on a piece of paper what we didn't want to carry into 2020. And we walked to a prayer line, crumbled it up, threw it away. I couldn't do that because I was up playing the bass for the worship team. And I just said to God, in mind, I didn't even say it audibly. I said, God, I don't want to carry oral allergy syndrome in 2020. And I didn't. I've been set free and healed since then. And it, those 15 years were rough, but you kind of get used to that stuff, and you almost kind of take it for granted. Um, and I never, I would pray on occasion, God heal me of this, but it wasn't really in depth. It was never anything that like I got down on my knees and sought him for. It was like, okay, so I can't eat an apple. You know what I mean? That you just get used to that stuff. Um, there was something different about that night, and I just, you know, and I said it just like that. God, I don't want to carry oral allergy syndrome into 2020, and I left it go. I didn't no more prayers after that, and I didn't. It was absolutely amazing, and I've been able to eat all that stuff ever since, and I haven't had any side effects or anything different. And it was weird for me. Like I tried fruits that don't even grow here. Like whatever, it doesn't matter. I couldn't eat anything, and it affects people differently. Some people can eat certain fruits and vegetables and not others. I think lettuce and like raw onions was about the only thing that I could eat without reacting at all. So that was pretty rough, but thank God I've been healed of that and moving forward.
Praise God. And I think those two areas, the finances and the health, are two areas where if God doesn't do something and show up, you're doing a faith walk. Like it's must. It's a must, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of hits you where it's real, and it's really real.
Yeah.
And I love your story. I love your testimony. That you know what, God showed up and He provided, even though the finances were rough. We actually got out of debt, which doesn't
Yeah.
even make logical sense, right? It's amazing,
No,
how
I mean on paper we should have lost our house. We should be in like debtor's court. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason on paper why we should have been able to do what we did, only because of God.
absolutely. And those stories are so awesome because it's real life, right? Like we're families, we
Mm-hmm.
have bills, my husband and I, we went through a financial trial kind of similar where our backs were against a wall, and it was like we got down to our last month and we were like, God, you have to show up or else, like, we could lose everything. And
Mm-hmm.
in 2 weeks God showed up. It was amazing and incredible. And these stories of God proves your faith, because I can say that I have faith, but until I back it up with my life and my choices, do
Right.
I really have faith?
Yeah.
Do I really have faith? I say, yeah, God's my provider, but I know I've got all my bills covered and then some, and I don't really need to worry about, or not worry, but stand in faith that
Right.
God needs to show up or else. I don't think,
That's right.
I mean, I just think that those two areas, health and finances, are where I tend to see people get tried, um, before the next season of life. The next thing that God is, like, it's almost like a deepening of the faith, right?
Yeah.
It's like a wilderness, a desert, but God calls the desert a garden because He grows and He does amazing things there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and two, your healing. God's our healer, right? And I love your story because I think there was a burn, because like I said, we go to the same church. So it was a burn a couple years later. And I don't remember if you gave your testimony first or if my husband released the word about God's healing food allergies. And you had already been
Mm-hmm.
healed. I think you gave your testimony that night too.
It might have been. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. And I was on keyboard that night. And I was like, God, I can't come forward for this altar call because I'm already up here playing keys. But I had a gluten issue, and I said, I really would love to not have this anymore. I would love to not have the pain and the paranoia that there's cross contamination and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd really love to not have this anymore. And my daughter too. God, my daughter too. Gluten and eggs she had, and God healed both of us.
That's awesome.
Gone. So
So maybe
God
the
is our
key is a good shepherd. If you want to be healed, you just join the worship team
join the
and
worship
play.
team. Oh, it is a blessing to serve. Really, it really is. Great team.
It is. Yeah.
But yeah, so let me put your Etsy shop up there. So you can find his designs at Etsy at Jesus First Designs. I think when I went on there, I saw like coffee mugs and T-shirts and
Yeah.
things like that. I think you had done a journal also, but can you
Yeah.
tell us what people can find there?
So I've actually did a couple of prayer journals that I published, and I actually published a 21-day devotional, and all of those are actually on Amazon. Um, so if you just like Amazon search my name uh, and devotional, or it's called Blessings in the Battle. It's devotional, and it's about walking through like wilderness experiences. Um, that 5-year period that I talked about is only a portion of my total story, but um, I've learned to rely on God in different ways other than that time in life. So I've got, unfortunately or fortunately, depending which way you look at it, a lot of wilderness stories. So, but like you said, there's growth there, and I think we all need to walk through those wildernesses, and that's really what the devotional is all about. And it's short, 21 day. And then there's a prayer journal that goes along with it, which is really just line pages to take notes while you're walking through that. So if you type my name, Michael Addison, and Blessings in the Battle in Amazon, you'll find it. And then you can link to me from that page to see the prayer journals that are available online as well.
Awesome. And I love that because sometimes, the wilderness, those wilderness times, you're right, they're not really fun to go through.
No,
But
but there is tremendous blessing there.
right, but the blessings of going through them with the Lord are just unparalleled, absolutely
Yeah.
unparalleled. Never fun, but always amazing.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
It is, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the Bible says that, discipline isn't fun while it's happening, right?
Right.
But in the end, it becomes a blessing.
Highlighting that when you say discipline, it's not necessarily like a punishment. It's
Right.
training. Discipline as in
Right.
training and coaching. And that wilderness is part of God's training and coaching process in all of our lives. And they're all unique. They're all, individualized because God knows how to get to those hidden areas of our hearts, right? To bring healing, to bring
Well, it
freedom.
tells us that He loves us, right? Like,
Mhm.
the Bible says that God disciplines the ones He loves,
Mhm.
right? So that when we go through those wilderness experiences, or we might have messed up and we might be reaping consequences of that, we can be assured that the discipline that we receive from the Lord is because He loves us, and that's always a nice assurance, that hey, God still sees me and He still loves me because He's disciplining me here because I know I messed up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, He always will put us back on track when we need to, right?
Mm-hmm.
For sure. But I think sometimes we get stuck on, like, as a parent, I say, "Oh, I'm disciplining my child," and what I really mean is I'm punishing them. But there's so much more to it than when it comes to discipline and God disciplining us. Yes, sometimes there's consequences for our sins, and we gotta be put back on track.
Yeah,
And sometimes He's just saying, "Let's go deeper. Let's take this thing deeper."
that's right.
So check him out. Jesus First Designs. What was the title of the journal again? Blessings in the Battlefield.
Blessings in the Battle. Yeah.
Blessings in the Battle on Amazon. Go check it out. I know, Mike, you and your wife have been a blessing to us and our family. Thank you so much for joining me today. And don't forget to tap over to DeborahHenne.com. Follow me on social on the X, Instagram, or Facebook at Deborah Henne Author. And let's not forget to tune into our thoughts to make sure they sound like Jesus's, so they sound like freedom.